So she disappears, right? She's no longer coming to class. And we don't know why. There was an adult involved in that situation. And I was like, yeah, you are so mature for your age. That man was a trash man as a husband. Thing is, my father and I would still be related, even if my father and my mother never got together. It's not incest, okay? We're not that white. Hello, my name is Muthoni Gitao. Welcome to another episode of Just Doing Life, the podcast, a space where we explore all the parts of life that we do not like to say out loud. After all, we are all just winging it. Hello, welcome to another episode of Options. My name is Muthoni Gitao, and this is Just Doing Life, the podcast. Options is a series where we talk about all the life lessons I have picked up along the way. Now, there are many, and we try to just be polite about it. No, we're not. We just talk about all the things. So this happens every Friday, and this is our 5th episode. Yo, we're doing so great. I'm so proud of us. Yay! And everyone in the room clapped. Yay! It sounds like I'm by myself in the room. There's one other person, but it's okay. Hamumjui na hayuko. But today we are going to be talking about the lessons that I have learned from the women that have come before me, relationship edition, because there's other things that I have learned. So we'll talk about those ones after. That's going to be the conversation today. But as usual, before we get to do this, umefanya homework. Did you do your homework? The homework for this past week, we were supposed to go back to the list that we wrote in episode 1, our self-care, our self-love. It was our self-love list. It was a list on how you would love to receive love, and you were supposed to pick one of the things from that list and do it for yourself. Did ya? Did ya? For me, I did. Mine was I picked treat yourself to something, and so I did. I got myself a little gift because I love gifts. It wasn't much, but I got myself a gift that has been very, very good to me. It's a good gift to have, and it's a good gift to give yourself. That is all I'm going to say. Hashtag there's rice at home. If you know, you know. Okay. So that was what I did for myself in terms of my homework. So if you're curious to see what today's homework is going to be, you're going to have to wait until the end of the episode. But let me know if you did do something for yourself, what it was, and if you are comfortable with it, please leave it down in the comment section, because we're all looking for ideas on the things we can do to show ourselves love every single freaking week. Okay, thanks. So now let's get into this conversation. Oh yeah, follow us on social media and all those things. JDL the podcast, that's the handle. Yeah. Lessons from the women, from the women that came before me, relationship edition. So this one is mostly inspired by. I was gonna say like 3. Okay, I was gonna say 4, 5 different women, but now I've realized it's actually a bit more because I'm thinking my grandmother is like the first one, and there's the other grandmother. I have learned something through observation, not necessarily conversations. So there's the grandmother tier, and then there's like my mom and her sisters, and then I realized the other tier that I'd forgotten are my elder cousins, my female elder cousins, because I have also learned a lot from them. As much as it wasn't like let's sit down and have a conversation, it was more of through observation and seeing things and knowing a pitfall to avoid, or don't do that. That doesn't work out. So I think it's basically, it's from 3 different generations, because my cousins are technically my peers because we are in the same generation. They are just slightly older than me. They have a bit more life experience than I do, but that's about it. So we'll be looking at it through the 3 different generations. The first thing that I learned was on being cautious. Here's the thing. No one ever told me be cautious. Actually, that's a lie. I was told, but it wasn't said like that. I remember when I was younger, and that thing it starts off when you're in school. And I remember we used to have this thing where qua desk, it's a desk that sits 3 people, and you'd have either girl, boy, or you'd have boy, girl, boy. So when they were doing that, no one, like when you're in class 3, class 4, you're not thinking, I wonder why they're pangaing us like this. Like, that's not a thought that you're thinking. You're just thinking, oh, it's because we're all supposed to mingle, blah, 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 and all the things, right? But I remember when I was about about, I want to say 12. I think it was 12. 12, yes, class six. So in class six, there was this day that we got this guys who do sanitary towels. It's a brand that we will not mention because it causes rashes and all those things, and we don't promote things that are harmful to African women. Okay, so they come to our school and they're doing the whole talk and they're teaching us about how to use pads. They taught us about condoms because remember they even had a banana and a condom, and they did the whole thing. And the whole time, as kids, we're there at 12, and we're just like, guys were just finding things funny. And the question was like, why is the condom oily? Like, some of these things weren't mentioned, but the most they did was like they showed us how to use the pad, how often you're supposed to change it, and that was about it. But I remember about a month later or so, a girl that I was in school with, her name was Nelias. I'll never forget her name because one, she had a very unique name. So she disappears, right? She's no longer coming to class, and we don't know why. And then someone comes and tells us, "Oh my God, I bumped into Nelias at the market and she's pregnant." So this, we're 12, okay? And we were like, "Wow, dang." So she never came back to school. We never had a conversation about it. But I remember like the parents also found out about it. And when people, you're never given the talk really, but you are given the talk where you're told they just go like, this is why you stay away from boys, okay? And that was it. But I'm now thinking back as an adult, oh my God, I have so many questions. One of the questions that I have is, was it really a boy? Because one thing I'll tell you about Nelias, because I remember her very well, because yeah, she had like this banging body. Like she was those ones who are told they were maturing a lot faster. Um, so it's like she had she had bigger boobs, she was curvier, but still a child. But compared to the rest of us who looked like sticks in the class, she did not look like a stick. And when I say the rest of us, I'm talking about myself, okay? You look like a boy and a stick in one. So we looked very different. When you think about it now as an adult, chances are there was an adult involved in that situation who saw Nelias and was like, yeah, you are so mature for your age, blah, 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 right? So Nelias disappears, never comes back to school, never hear from her again. We never hear shit about her ever again. So I remember that point was this is why you stay away from boys. Then in class seven, which is like a year later, I remember I had made friends with well, my cousins, myself and we used to live together. So there's this place we used to go play, and these guys had like a field, so they'd allow us to go play in there. They were like some rich white folk. And they allowed us to play with their kids because they were like excited. We're teaching them Swahili. It was interesting. So during school holidays, we'd go play, blah, blah. And I remember one time, one of my friends telling me, it's like, oh, stop laughing with that boy. He's my boyfriend. And I was like, oh, shit, I'm sorry. I didn't even know exactly what that meant, but I was like, okay, cool. I'll stop laughing with them. And I remember being the curious person I am, I went and wrote a letter. I never sent it. I wrote it and I kept it in my drawer, like in the house. And the letter was basically me asking, it's like, oh, I was told not to laugh with you because you're so and so's boyfriend. Are you their boyfriend? And if that's the case, what's the problem with the laughing? And then I'd written two letters. So one was to my friend and one was to this guy. I never sent either of the letters because privacy is a thing that is assumed in an African household. My mother, when she was looking for things, she finds the letters. Yo, let me tell you, the tongue lashing I received that day. I was told, no, now you see, you're going to go and you're going to get yourself pregnant. And the fear was always the pregnancies. Okay. FYI, at this point, Mimi had decided years in advance, because at this point I'm 13. 3 years prior, I had already decided, Mimi, I'm not going to participate in the pregos. I am not going to participate in the child rearing or childbearing situations of life. Because I had seen my mom pregnant when I was 10. And that was the first time I ever articulated that, yeah, I don't think this is for me. So basically, me at this point, I'm 3 years into my decision. When I was 10 was also the same time I said, I think I'm going to wait until I'm 21 to have sex, because I think at 21, I will know what I'm doing. Because right now, no one is talking to you about sex, what sex is about, none of that stuff. So at that point, it's still this like abstract thing in the air. So at 10, I was just like, you know what? If the sex is what is leading to the children's, and I've decided I don't want the children's, I will have to stay away from the sex. So I will stay away from the sex until I'm 21, because in my head I was like 21 is an adult, as much as they said 18. For me, my math was saying 21. So my mom finds the letters and I get a tongue lashing. And then in my head, I was just like, I hadn't even sent the letters. I just wrote them. I didn't send them. And I was like, I didn't understand why she was being so about it. Fast forward to, I think, a year. No, I think it's the same year. That same year, my aunt was pregnant. And so my aunt used to date this other guy, Kitambo. And they broke up. And then she ended up now with her husband. And I remember one time she had come to see us. So she'd left her husband and she'd come to see us. And as I was walking her to the stage, she tells me, oh, can you believe that I bumped into that guy? And despite how heavily pregnant I am, he was still hitting on me. And then she just goes like, yeah, men. That was it. I didn't know what the men meant, but like he was like, akiwa naume. But I knew it's not a good thing, right? So in terms of being cautious, it was never like a direct, let's sit down and have a conversation. You should be cautious around men. You should be cautious around relationships you enter. And this is why it was never a full on, let's have a conversation about it. But I definitely picked up the being cautious thing because it was something that came up too much for it not to be a factor. When things keep popping up, eventually you go like, yeah, there has to be a reason why these people keep saying this. They must know something that I don't know. And so you go like, okay, cool. Another thing, another lesson that I picked up or that I learned is the lesson on options. Okay? The beauty of having options. This series is called Options. But yeah, the beauty of having options. Options were not a thing. Most of the people I was around ended up in the relationships they were in because of certain situations. For instance, like I know people who ended up getting married to someone because they had the sex one time and the preggers happened and then they became the pregnant and then the pregnancy thingy, the pregnancy becomes a child. And then now they're like, and then they just end up, they're like, okay, I guess we are now doing life together just out of that situation. I also know people who ended up in situations because they were trying to run away from the conditions they were living in at home. Um, I grew up in Kawangware. Kawangware is not a fancy place. I know it has changed over the years. Not that it's fancier, it's actually worse now. But it was a place where there was also hierarchies where there's the the rich-ish guys, what were landlords, watoto wa landi, they were the prime eligible bachelors and bachelorettes, and then watoto wa tenants walikuwa wanajaribu kuhook up. So the kids of the tenants are trying to end up with the landlord's kid because then the idea is that the landlord's kid will inherit the land that they're lording over, and then you can also become a landlord, landlady through marriage or whatever, right? Because that was with a lot of situations, a lot of people, that was the thing you are aiming for. It's the thing you are trying to, yeah. Okay. So those were the hierarchies. So basically, oh God, in terms of options, the options weren't that many because a lot of people also didn't go beyond that area. It's like the funny thing is, I know people who, and I used to say this as a joke, which it's not funny, but it's true, that there are people who were born there, raised there, and have never gone beyond, right? Maybe now it has changed, but like I remember when I was younger, or the ones who go beyond, it's like someone came from Ushago, akaenda akashuka, it's country bus, akaenda railways, akapanda. Like all they know, even when they're going to town, if you tell them going to CBD, they only know how to get from railways to country bus to panda a bus that's going to Shags. That's it. They never explored, they never did anything outside of that. And it was because it was like the idea was everything is predestined. It's like the fates have already decided And then the other option that was available when you would look around, it was you'd either end up with a makanga or a driver. And I saw a bunch of people I went to school with, and the same thing happened with them. And or even if they don't end up like married or whatever, they'd end up having a child with either a makanga or a driver. And when a foreigner, someone who's not from the area, ends up in the area, then they become like quote unquote prime property. They're like everyone wants them, or they're so eligible, blah blah blah. So in terms of options, for me, what I realized was, oh, this area does not offer that many options. And also, in terms like that's like in just the space. When I was also looking at like my parents, I was looking at my grandparents. My grandmother, my grandmother met my grandfather once, and it was decided they were getting married. I don't know if they were in love. I don't know that story, because what I know is like by the time my granddad was dying, um, that man was a trash man as a husband and to an extent as a father. But it was so interesting seeing, and but he was a great grandfather. Like to us, he was like legit proper, which is why you also have to accept that people can be different people with different people. I hope that makes sense. So basically, when he died, in my head, I was thinking, oh, my grandmother is going to be free for the first time in her life because they'd been together for 60 plus years. My grandmother met this guy when she was like a teenager. Um, yeah, I think she was a teenager. And they met once, and then the next thing is like a wedding is being planned and all these things, and then now they're married. They were together for 60 plus years. Then, when I look at my mom, how did my mom meet my father? Funny thing is, my father and I would still be related even if my father and my mother never got together. Let me explain, okay? It's not incest, okay? We're not that white. Anyway, let me explain. So basically, my uncle, who's my mother's big brother, was getting married. And so they had to go see where this woman comes from, where my aunt comes from. So my mom, being like the sister to my uncle, was one of the guys who came for the, the ratio, blah, blah, all that. And my dad, so God, this is hard. My dad, so the woman that was getting married to my uncle is my dad's aunt. Okay? Are you following this family tree? I don't know if it's making sense. Sydney, if it's making sense, there's someone here. Please shake your head. Okay, I've been told it's making sense. Okay, so my aunt is also my dad's aunt. Okay? My mother's brother married my father's aunt. So during their rurasho, my father meets my mother. And then they're like, oh, whatever. Like, okay, so me, the way I was just told is like, he said he saw her and he winked at her. I was like, oh, she's cute. And then the rest is quote unquote history. But so my mother goes back to Shags. And then anytime my mother would come visit my uncle, who was now her big brother, my dad would come nyemelearing. Let's call it what it is. He would come. That's the day he pretends he's been sent there sijui by his mother to do what? Because now his mother and my aunt are sisters. I hope that makes sense. So basically, that's what I mean. Like, if they were never married and I was still me, which in terms of DNA, I wouldn't be, but we would still sort of be related. Again, going back to options, that's how they met. They met through that whatever, and then they were like, ah, cool, then blah blah, 1+1=2. And then I was born. 1+1 is them, and then 2 is me. Okay. So I was born. So again, in terms of option, the pool was very, when I look at the stories, because I know my grandmother and my granddad met in a church or a church function. Then my mom and my dad meet at like a family function. And then now when you come back, when I'm growing up, the things that you see, it's like, options ni hizi tu. So you have to choose wisely. But the thing that I came to learn from that is that, oh, I'm grateful that I have so many options, because in leaving to go to school opened my worldview. The interest that I had that took me to places like the theater, that got me to start performing poetry, they also opened one, my pool of access. And then there's things like social media that also expands your options, and it expands your pool of access to people because of the internet as well. So I was like, oh wow, it's interesting how even when you think about stories from the past and how people used to get married, it would be always people from like the same village, and then some would even be planned beforehand, where like, yeah, I think my son will just marry that girl, and they even start having conversations when you think about like arranged marriages in the past and stuff like that. But it was always people from the same communities and everything. So having options was one of the lessons that I've picked up from them. I'm like, and I'm grateful that options are there. Which brings me to, as much as you have options, there's the matter of choice. So I'm not saying they didn't have choices, but when you think about choice, I'm thinking choice in terms, I'm looking at it in multiple ways. Um, Number one, I'm looking at choice from the perspective of choosing if you're going to get married or not, if you're going to have children or not. That's a choice. That's one. And then there's also choice in so we're thinking choice in terms of marriage, choice in terms of having kids. I'm not saying they didn't have choices, but to an extent they did not. Great example would be like when I think of my grandmother, the the things were set out, like the roles are already set out from the moment, like even the whole point of getting married, it's like immediately you're married, it's like, yeah, time to start tracking children, it's time to start giving birth, and then you give birth, and then you give birth. Because I know that once my grandmother lost two of her kids when she was really young. I was going to say my mom is a replacement child, technically. My mom and my aunt. So my grandmother lost two daughters earlier on. Like, she has, in total, she has three, four, five, six. She has six kids, but she had had, she had four. Well, before the other one. And then two of them died, two girls. And then she ended up now having my mom and my aunt. And then now, because my aunt is the last born, my mom is the second last born. So hence the word replacement children, which it's a terrible term. Please don't quote me on it. It was a joke. It's a nasty joke, but yeah, basically when I say that, I mean in terms of the people they were named after. Like, because in our culture, when you have kids, is the way the naming of the way the kids are named. So basically, my mom is named after my grandmother's mother. But you see, she wasn't the first one. There was already someone who was named after my grandmother's mother. Then they died, and then now my mom. But they don't share a name, so like the name changes. I was also told something about the fact that Muthoni, like my grandmother was the first of her name before me. So Muthoni, she wasn't named after someone called Muthoni, but I'm named after her as a Muthoni. That's a whole. It's a that is a class by itself. Because even me, I'm still trying to understand the thing that happened in between. So basically, so I was talking about choice, and when that happens, like there's an expectation of this is the role you're expected to play, and you don't have much of a choice in that. I remember when my mom would tell us stories about them as kids, and how my grandfather used to work in Nairobi, and the way he'd show up and he wouldn't like pay school fees for them because he didn't see the importance of going to school, because to him it didn't make sense. Like with the boys, it was like, they'll just learn how to drive vehicles and then they'll become drivers. With like my mom, it's like, it's even worse. You're women. What will you do with this education? Your job is to just do your work, do your chores in this house. Once you grow up and you're old enough for me to get cows out of you, I'll get cows out of you, and you'll go just work in someone else's house. So there was no choice in terms of like, oh, now I want to do this, now I want to do this course, now I want to do this. And my mom is my mom is such an artistic person. I think all the art and the creativity that I have comes from my mother. My mother is like, my mom used to do people's hair. You know, the ones that they would do with the can, and she'd use the can to straighten people's hair. Can and Aramis, okay? And she'd do people's hair and blow dry them. She's the one who used to toboa people's maskio. She was giving them piercings in the middle of Muranga, okay? So my mom is a very creative person. She also does embroidery and all this is stuff, even like crocheting and stuff. all this is stuff like she learns through just observing people. And I think that's also where I get it, because even me, I can learn to do things through just watching. The way I braid, I learned watching my mother do hair, and that's how I know how to do hair. I just watched her do it. Like I would watch her do milazos on people, milazos ni those cornrows, and I was like, ah, cool. And then I just copy her and do it like on a doll, and I know how to do it. So she's a really, really creative person. So now I'm imagining like if she'd been given the choice to explore her creativity, all the things she'd have probably done with her life. Um, it's something that I'm usually curious about at times, but it is what it is. She lived in a time where that wasn't exactly a choice. When now we talk about things like, when now I stand up and say I do not want to have children, and people go like, but why? And I say I don't want to because it's a choice, and people don't understand it. It's because sometimes people are still in that indoctrination of this is what is expected of women, and so you should be aiming and working towards this. So when someone says anything contrary to what the norm is, then kidogo kidogo is like, oh my god, what is wrong with this person? Then the conversation becomes that. And even when you think about how people talk about how their great grandmothers had multiple kids and stayed in the house and did all these things for their grandfathers, and how their mothers did all the cooking and the cleaning and the whatever, and they never complained, it's because they didn't have a choice. They really did not have choices. The reason women today can say, yeah, it's fine, I don't need you, I'm fine, it's because we have choices that our parents and our great grandparents did not have. Our mothers did not have these choices. Our great grandmothers did not have these choices. And we are going to do all the things with the choices because we are living for them and ourselves with our choices. And they can be thought through. Because even you see mothers who end up, I remember there was a conversation, I think it was last year, where some guy came online complaining that their mother left their father after 50 years of marriage, and she's out here like just living large, and now the father has been forced to go into a home, and they don't understand why, and now they have to take care of their father. And it's like, yeah, because he was probably a shit husband, and she finally got her freedom, and I was so happy for her wherever the hell she was. And I was like, even you as kids, she needs to cut you off, because clearly you don't care for her happiness. Women were always expected to self-sacrifice for everyone, and so when women today are like, you're an adult, I'm an adult, I'm not self-sacrificing for anybody, you have hands, I have hands, if you want food, you know where the kitchen is, then it becomes this whole conversation of like, women today, they're not meaning, they're not blah blah, they're not all these things. No, women today have choice, beginning and end. Okay. One thing, another lesson that I learned. Okay, so yeah, so choice is very important, and having choice, we should be grateful for that. Having choice and having options, definitely grateful. Another lesson that I learned was that staying doesn't change things. Okay. Um, Back to my grandmother and my grandfather. When I think of that relationship and all the things that I saw or the conversations that I had of said relationship and the ups and the downs and everything, it was so interesting for me because, hey, even towards the end, my grandmother was always like just still praying for this man and his health and me the entire time. Okay, I'm not saying I was praying for my grandfather to die. He was sick, but like it was a lot of work on my grandmother as well because he was sick, he was bedridden, he couldn't do much for himself, so she had to still do everything for him. And one thing I know for sure about that man, okay, one thing I know for sure, that if it was my grandmother in that situation, he would not have been in that house, he would not have been taking care of her, he would not have been doing all those things for her, he would have probably been praying, but like from a different church in like a different woman's house or something, I don't know. For me, the way I know him, that man, like the selfishness in his bones would not have allowed him to do that. Why am I saying this? Because even when he was uko sick and whatever, so my grandmother's teeth started sumbuaing her, and she couldn't kula the githeri and the whatever. He had dentures, so he didn't have meno, but he had like the ones you were. So he kept insisting that she should make githeri because that's what he wants to eat, knowing very well that she can't eat it because because her teeth were like shaky and like she had like issues with her meno, and it was painful and she would need to eat something softer, but he kept insisting. So it got to a point where like my grandmother had to cook 2 meals because there's two of them. So one for him and one for her, just because he still insisted that that's what he wanted to eat. So that's how I know that it wouldn't have mattered. He would not have taken care of her if the shoe was on the other foot. Okay. So staying doesn't really change. You can't change people. Me, that's one thing I have learned. And I think the other thing I've also learned from that is like you can't love someone into change. It doesn't matter how much you love them. If people are idiots, they'll still be idiots. If they're a-holes, they'll still be a-holes. If they're disrespectful towards you and they don't value you, they will still be disrespectful towards you and still show you how much they don't value you. It doesn't matter if you put up with the BS for 50 years or if you put up with it for 5 years. For me, by the time I was living my relationship, this was the realization that it's not gonna change. And I asked myself, if nothing changes, would I still want to be here a year from now, or 2 years, or 3 years, or 4 years? Do I want to still stay in this? Like, how much longer am I willing to put up with the same situation where nothing changes? And the answer was not any longer. When you realize, you're like, oh, if I wouldn't want to be here 5 years from now, or a year from now, or 3 months from now, so what am I doing here now? Staying doesn't change things. And the final lesson that I've learned from the women that have come before me is the importance of choosing yourself. Most of them didn't choose themselves. They did not. They prioritized everyone. Even now, I don't think they still prioritize themselves because, like, I'll even have certain conversations with my mom. Like, I've gotten to a point where sometimes, even like when I want to gift my mom something, it's something I learned. When I want to gift my mom something, I have to go buy something that's specifically for her. Because even a great example, when you think about when you send money home, when you send money to your mother, that money goes to buying things for the house. It will be used to buy food, it will be used to pay for electricity, it will be used to contribute towards something. It's always helping someone else. And then when you send money to your father, it's his money. He gets to do whatever he wants to do with the money. That I learned with my grandmother. I've also noticed it with my father and my mother, because with my father, if I give my father money, I know for sure ni ataska. He's not going to be like, wacha pia tununue maziwa. No, that one it's for a beer. Okay. If I give money to my mom, I know for sure she's going to go do house shopping. She's going to do something with it for the house. So she's not going to do something for herself with the money. When I was also in a relationship, one of the things I realized was like most of the money, my money used to go into everything. I like my money comes and leaves because it's like it goes into the upkeep of the house. It always goes into the home. And this is the case for a lot of women, even now and today, in today's age, to the point where when you hear a woman doing their nails and they're like, oh, it's something small I'm doing for myself. Self-care for you, like you don't even have, it's something you even have to, you're trying to finesse into the budget to make sure that you can be left or you can actually do it. So choosing yourself is really, really important. In It's really, really important because you get to put your own needs first. What are your needs? And then you prioritize those ones first, and then everyone else comes second. What are your desires? What are your ambitions? What are you hoping to achieve? And then you put that. Do you want to go to school first before, I don't know, ABC? Are you trying to get into a course? Are you trying to finish school before you start having children? Are you going to now say, no, my husband said that we should start having kids as soon as we're married, so it's time to start whatever. Do you want to do your PhD before you become a mother, before you get into the motherhood journey? Prioritizing yourself, that is a part of choosing yourself. You have to put your own needs first. Your well-being has to come first. One of the reasons why I think when we think about well-being, your well-being coming first, one of the things that I think makes it very important is that if you're not okay, you can't even show up for other people completely, because if you can't give to yourself, that means you're already overextending yourself. So what are your aspirations? Focus on that first, and then let everyone else come after that. Because when you're okay, then everyone, it's easier to give. When you give to yourself, it's easier to give to others. But if you have nothing and you're not giving to yourself, what are you giving to others? You have nothing to give because you're empty. If you're running on empty, what are you giving? So you have to prioritize yourself. You have to choose yourself. It's very, very important to choose yourself. I have lived a life where I've seen so many women not choosing themselves, putting their lives on hold because, oh, we're having kids. Oh, he wants to do this. Oh, he wants to start a business. Oh, he wants to. You have to choose yourself. That's very important. That was my final point. Time for our self-love exercise of the week. So I don't know why I'm singing my words. So our self-love exercise for this week, our homework, okay, because I give you homework now. I want you to write yourself a letter from your future self. The future self that has all the dreams that you have. They've achieved all of them, all the aspirations that you have, and they want for nothing. They're living your dream life, the one that you dream about now. Have like write a letter from them to you here now, wherever that is it a year from now? Do you think that's where it is? Do you think it's when you're 35? Do you think when it's when you're 40 or 50? Write yourself a letter from that version of you. Don't worry, it's gonna come to you because they say we all exist at the same time. So just tap into 50-year-old Muthoni. What would 50-year-old Muthoni, who has achieved all her dreams and everything, say to this Muthoni here? And write that letter and read it as much as you want. That is the exercise for this week. I will be checking back in with you next week to confirm that you actually did it. Thank you for spending your time here, for allowing me to tell you stories about the women in my life. I will do another episode. This one was like relationship whatever's and the things that I have learned. Some of these things I picked up from them, and then it took it like the lessons came later. When even me I experienced them for myself, and I was like, should have learned from other people's experiences. But hey, lo and behold, here we are. But I would want to do also another episode on lessons I've learned, especially on what it means to be a woman and being resilient and being strong, as much as we hate that word. Thank you. Don't forget to follow us on social media at JDL the podcast. That's on TikTok and Instagram. You can use that as a hashtag on Twitter. You can check out our website, muthonigitao.com. That's why we have all our episodes. If you've missed anything, all the episodes are there, and also some of the cool things that we do on the side or on the front or on the middle. I don't know. We live in an economy where we have multiple sides. So one of the sides is this one, and then all the other sides are also on the on the website. I am Muthoni Gitao. That's my personal handle. I will see you back here next Friday with another episode of Options. But don't forget, we have a little series that happens every single Monday where we talk about current issues. I hope to see you there as well. Have yourself a lovely, lovely weekend. Bye-bye. Adios, amigos. Nakuagami kwa heri.